The paper smelled like gardenias. Serena Calloway noticed that first, before she read a single word, before she registered the ivory envelope sitting on her drafting table like something placed there by someone who wanted to ruin her Tuesday. The paper stock was thick, the kind that costs $12 per sheet. She knew because she had priced it herself once, for a client who wanted wedding invitations that felt like money. She picked it up with 2 fingers. Her left hand still had a faint smear of chrome yellow along the thumb. She had been recoloring a floor plan layout when the delivery arrived. She set down her Staedtler pen. She did not want to open it. She opened it. The script inside was hand-lettered. Tasteful. Probably done by a calligrapher who charged $400 for the job. Mr. Bennett Ashford and Miss Cassandra Holt request the honor of your presence at their wedding celebration Saturday, the 25th of October. The Glasshouses, Manhattan. Serena read it twice. The second time, the room tilted. Not because she still loved Bennett. She had been honest with herself about that for months, peeling back the feeling layer by layer, the way she stripped old paint off salvaged furniture in her Red Hook studio. What she found underneath was not love. It was 3 years of explaining away someone else's smallness. 3 years of shrinking her own opinions in meetings he attended, so he would not feel outpaced. 3 years of designing a future around a man who had already decided she was a stepping stone. No, it was not love that made the room tilt. It was the date. October 25th, in 11 days, which was the exact same day she was supposed to sign the Halcyon Group contract, the largest interior design commission of her career, a $42,000 project she had spent 4 months preparing a proposal for. The same contract Bennett had promised to put in a good word for. The same contract that had gone silent 3 weeks ago when his assistant sent a one-line email. The client has decided to go in a different direction. Serena set the invitation down on her drafting table. She looked out her window at the East River. She thought, he used my proposal. He gave them my work and took the credit. She did not cry. She picked up her Staedtler pen, but her hand was shaking. Cliffhanger, she stared at the invitation for a long moment. Then, very slowly, she picked up her phone and typed one message to Marcus. I'm going, and I'm not going alone. Before we go any further, I need to tell you what the next 24 hours were going to cost Serena Calloway. Not in money, though that would come too. In choices. The kind of choices that look small from the outside, but split a life into before and after. In less than 12 hours, Serena would walk into the most beautiful room she had ever designed. A room she had never been paid for, on the arm of a man whose name she did not know. She would feel the stares. She would feel Bennett's eyes find her from across the reception hall and go still. And she would make a decision in that moment that would change the next 2 years of her life. But here is what she did not know yet. The man she was about to ask for help was not a stranger passing through. He was the most careful person in any room he entered. He had been watching Bennett Ashford for 8 months before Serena even thought to walk through that door. He already knew what Bennett had done to her proposal. He already knew about the Halcyon Group. He knew things about the man who had hurt her that she had not yet had the courage to put into words. And he said yes. Not because she was beautiful, though she was. Not because he was impulsive. He said yes because he recognized something in the set of her shoulders. The way she was holding herself together at the seams and refusing to let anyone see the effort. He had seen that posture before. On his cousin Nadia, 7 years ago, the night she stood alone in a parking garage and he was 40 minutes too late. He was not going to be late again. Stay with me until the end of this story. There are 3 things you will not see coming. There is one moment that will make you want to rewind and watch it twice. And there is an ending that Serena Calloway did not earn by luck or rescue. She earned it with her own 2 hands, one decision at a time. Love always wins here. But first, it costs something. Let's go back to where it started. Cliffhanger. Because the truth about the man she was about to meet, the truth about who Roman Voss really was, and why he was standing in that exact spot at that exact hour, was not a coincidence. Not even close. Serena Calloway fixed broken spaces for a living. Not the grand kind, not soaring penthouses or hotel lobbies funded by investors who didn't read their own contracts. She fixed the overlooked kind. A pediatric waiting room in the Bronx where the chairs were the color of old mustard and the children sat rigid with fear. A bakery in Greenpoint whose owner had spent 30 years baking perfect bread in a room that felt like a storage closet. A community library in Bed-Stuy that had good bones and no budget, and a leaking skylight that turned the reference section gold every afternoon between 2 and 4. She had a gift for seeing what a space could be if someone paid attention to it. She did not apply this skill to herself. That was the honest truth she didn't like to sit with for too long. Her studio in Red Hook was a converted ground-floor workshop, half her drafting materials on one table and her mother's prescription paperwork on the other. Every surface had a purpose. There were no decorative objects, only things that worked. A pinboard covered in fabric swatches and floor plan sketches. A shelf of architecture books with cracked spines. An espresso machine that made mediocre espresso and had been making it reliably for 6 years. On the windowsill, one ceramic pot of rosemary that her mother had given her the year she opened the studio. It was still alive. Serena watered it every Monday without fail, which was more consistency than most people in her life had managed. She was 33 years old. She had one close friend, Marcus, who photographed corporate spaces and made her laugh. She had a mother in treatment at New York Presbyterian, whose insurance covered 60% of the costs and whose pride covered none of the rest. She had a small and careful life that she had built from scratch, after the kind of childhood that teaches you to rely on yourself before anyone else. What she did not have was anyone who saw her the way she saw those spaces, with attention, with patience, with the belief that the structure underneath was worth saving. She watered the rosemary every Monday. She hadn't noticed she'd been waiting for someone to do the same for her. Cliffhanger. She almost didn't go to the wedding. She had her hand on her phone at 11:30 that night, ready to text Marcus. Never mind, I can't. She never sent it. What stopped her was something her mother had said from her hospital bed 3 weeks earlier, and she would not understand why until much, much later. Bennett Ashford did not think of himself as someone who used people. That was the most important thing to understand about him. He had a story for every version of himself that made him the reasonable one. The practical one. The one who was simply being realistic about what a relationship needed to survive in New York at a certain level of ambition. He had met Serena at an industry mixer in Chelsea when they were both 29. She had been wearing a gray linen dress and explaining to someone why exposed concrete should almost never be used in spaces where children would be present. Something about acoustic hardness and the way fear amplifies in echo chambers. He had thought she was remarkable. He had not been wrong about that part. What followed was 3 years that looked like love and functioned like leverage. He borrowed her taste. When he needed to impress a client, Serena would walk through the space first and tell him in 15 minutes, exactly what it was missing. He would repeat her observations in meetings and accept the compliments. She cooked dinner for his colleagues 7 times and was never introduced as more than, "My girlfriend, she's in design." He told her she was too sensitive when she mentioned it. He borrowed her work once. He told himself it was a collaborative contribution. She had built the Halcyon Group proposal over 4 months. Every layout, every material specification, every cost projection formatted into a 68-page document that was, by any professional standard, a masterpiece. He had taken it to Gerald Holt's office and presented it as the work of our team. He got the contract. He got Cassandra Holt as a bonus. Gerald's daughter had been at that meeting. Serena got a 1-line email from his assistant. He sent her a wedding invitation 6 months later because he genuinely believed she would appreciate the gesture. He thought she would see it as proof that things had ended cleanly, amicably, like adults. He had no idea she was coming. Cliffhanger. And he had absolutely no idea who she was bringing with her. The breakup had arrived on a Wednesday morning in April, while Serena was on the subway heading to a client meeting in Midtown. Her phone buzzed. She assumed it was Marcus sending her a photo of something absurd, the way he did before 9 a.m., when he'd been awake since 6 editing. She looked down. Bennett had written 4 sentences. She read them 3 times, standing between a woman listening to a podcast and a teenager doing calculus homework, holding a pole with one hand and her phone with the other. "I've been thinking about this for a while. I don't think we're in the same place anymore, professionally or personally. I care about you, but I think we both know this isn't working. I hope you find everything you're looking for." She got off at the next stop. The wrong stop, 1 station early. She stood on the platform and stared at the tile wall. It was covered in a mosaic of blue and white fish that she had always thought was ugly and had always meant to look up the artist of, just to understand the intention. She understood the intention now. Sometimes you make something that looks like beauty, but it's just noise. She did not call him. She did not text back. She stood there for 4 minutes. Then she walked up to the street, hailed a cab, and went to her client meeting. She presented a material board for a children's library renovation. She was, by every external measure, completely professional. It was only when she got back to Red Hook that night that she sat down on the floor of her studio and let herself feel the specific shape of what had happened. He had not ended a relationship. He had closed a transaction. She found out about the Halcyon contract 3 weeks later. A colleague from architecture school, now working at Holt Group, sent her a LinkedIn message out of a polite kind of guilt. "Did you work on the Halcyon proposal? Because it looks a lot like your aesthetic." Serena sat very still in front of her MacBook for a long time. Then she opened the Halcyon Group's press release announcing their new design partnership. Bennett's name was listed as lead designer. Cliffhanger. She screenshot everything. She saved it to a folder on her desktop labeled April. She didn't know yet what she would do with it, but she was no longer shaking. New York Presbyterian was 17 blocks from Serena's studio. She went every Tuesday and Thursday, always arriving with a Starbucks coffee for herself and green tea from the deli on the corner for her mother. Diane hated hospital coffee and had not complained about a single thing since her diagnosis, which meant Serena had to be very careful to remove every unnecessary friction from the visits. Diane Calloway was 61 years old and had spent 40 of those years making things comfortable for other people. She had raised Serena alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in Astoria, working as a school administrator by day and doing alterations for a dry cleaner 2 evenings per week. She had never taken a vacation, She had saved $17,000 over 30 years, which felt like everything and turned out, in the context of stage 2 breast cancer treatment, to cover about 3 months. The insurance handled 60%. Serena handled the rest. She had restructured her billing schedule. She had taken on 2 additional clients, a florist in Carroll Gardens and a dental office in Flushing, whose projects were small and whose budgets were modest. She had stopped buying architectural references at McNally Jackson and had started checking them out from the Brooklyn Public Library. She had not told her mother any of this. By the morning the wedding invitation arrived, her Chase account held $4,231. The next treatment cycle began in 18 days. The gap between what insurance covered and what the hospital billed was, at current pace, approximately $6,800. She had been doing the math in her head for so long that it had become a kind of background frequency, the way traffic noise becomes invisible until it stops. She sat with her mother that Thursday, and they talked about a documentary Diane had watched on her iPad, about a woman who spent 12 years restoring a medieval garden in France. Diane said, "That's what you do, Sari. You restore things." She said it like it was the most natural observation in the world. Serena nodded and drank her Starbucks. She did not say, "I don't know how to restore this." Cliffhanger. What Serena did not know, what she could not have known sitting in that hospital room, was that in 9 days, the answer to the gap in her account would walk into her life wearing a navy suit, and it would have nothing to do with charity and everything to do with justice. Marcus Webb heard about the invitation on a Thursday. He called back within 40 seconds of reading Serena's text, which was a record even for him. "Tell me you're not going," he said. She could hear him moving around his apartment, the sound of a camera bag being zipped, which he always did when he was agitated. "I haven't decided," she said. "Siri. I know. He used your work. He sent you a wedding invitation on top of it. That is sociopathic behavior in a nice envelope. So don't go." She was quiet for a moment. Outside her studio window, a tugboat was moving slowly down the East River. She watched its red hull until it disappeared behind the bridge support. "He chose that venue," she said. "The Glasshouses. You know why he chose it?" Marcus was quiet. "That's where I told him I wanted to host my first solo exhibition someday. It was on our 3rd date. He remembered it well enough to book it for the most important day of his life." She paused. "He took that too. And he doesn't even know he did." The silence on the line lasted 4 full seconds. "I need to walk into that room," Serena said. "I need to walk in there and look at the space and feel nothing except what I feel in any room I'm working in. I need to see it as a room, not as something he stole from me." She took a breath. "Does that make sense?" "It makes sense," Marcus said. "It's also going to be one of the hardest things you've ever done." "Then you shouldn't go alone." "I know," she said. She stared at the invitation on her drafting table. The gardenias had faded. What she smelled now was the rosemary from the windowsill. "I'll drive you," Marcus said. "Saturday, 5 o'clock. I'll be outside." She said, "Thank you." She hung up. She looked at the invitation for 1 more minute. Then she opened her laptop and began working on a floor plan for the dental office in Flushing, because she had a deadline, and the math did not stop for feelings. Cliffhanger. What she did not tell Marcus, the thing she had not admitted out loud to anyone, was that she had no intention of walking into the Glasshouses alone. She just didn't know yet who she was going to ask. The Glasshouses sat on the Hudson River like a promise someone else had made. floor-to-ceiling glass on 3 sides. Steel beams painted the color of aged graphite. Inside, the light moved the way light moves in spaces designed to make people feel that money is its own kind of grace. By the time Serena and Marcus arrived at 6:15 on Saturday evening, the sun was going down behind New Jersey, and the Hudson was the color of hammered copper. It was the most beautiful room she had ever imagined. She had described it to Bennett on their 3rd date from memory, having walked past the building twice and looked up the architectural plans out of professional admiration. She had said, "Imagine a reception in there. Glass on every side and the river at sunset. You'd feel like you were floating." She had not known, saying it, that she was handing him the blueprint for someone else's wedding. Marcus held the door. She walked in. The room smelled of white roses and warmed champagne, and the particular note of a crowd of well-dressed people performing the best versions of themselves. A string quartet was playing near the north window, Vivaldi, something from the Four Seasons, which Serena's mother used to play in the kitchen on Sunday mornings. She took one drink from a passing server's tray. Pellegrino. Her hand needed something to hold. She looked for Bennett out of reflex, found him near the floral arch, taller than she remembered, or perhaps just louder in the way people get when they're on stage. He was laughing at something. He had a champagne flute in one hand, and the other rested on the small of Cassandra Holt's back. Cassandra was lovely. Ivory dress, dark hair, the particular composure of a woman who had been told since childhood that rooms were arranged for her presence. Serena looked away. The room tilted, just slightly, just enough to tell her that she was not as healed as she had told herself. She turned away from Bennett. She turned toward the bar, and she saw 3 feet to her right, a man in a navy suit looking at his phone. Cliffhanger. She did not plan what happened next. She did not think it through. She did the thing she always did in moments of structural failure. She made a fast decision and dealt with the consequences later. She counted the seconds afterward, the way you count seconds after lightning to measure how close the storm is. 1. She turned to face him. 2. She registered details: navy suit, dark hair with silver at the temples, a jaw like something load-bearing, a stillness that felt architectural rather than cold. 3. She opened her mouth. 4. She said it. "I need you to walk in there with me. I'll explain later. Please." He looked up from his phone. His eyes were gray. Not the flat gray of winter sidewalks, the gray of deep water before a storm, the kind of gray that has depth and movement in it. He looked at her in a way that was not assessment and was not dismissal. It was something rarer, actual attention. The string quartet shifted to something slower. Someone near the floral arch laughed too loudly. "Please," she said again. She didn't know why she said it twice. She never asked for things twice. The word felt foreign in her mouth, like a door she had not opened in a very long time. The man's phone screen went dark. He slid it into his jacket pocket. He looked at her for one more second. Then he looked toward the reception hall. Just a glance. The kind of read-the-room assessment that takes less than a breath. Then he looked back at her. "All right," he said. One word. No questions. He didn't ask who she was or why or what this was about. He just offered her his arm the way someone offers a chair to a person who has been standing for too long. She took it. His forearm was solid under her hand. He walked at her pace, not pulling, not leading, just present. She could feel Marcus 15 feet behind them. She could sense the moment he realized what was happening, could almost hear the mental sound of him stopping cold. They crossed the threshold into the reception hall together. The room accepted them the way rooms accept people who belong in them, without fanfare, without pause. She kept her eyes forward. Her heart was a construction site. Cliffhanger. What she didn't know, what Marcus had seen from across the room and was now standing very still because of, was that the man beside her was Roman Voss, and Roman Voss did not walk into rooms. Rooms rearranged themselves when Roman Voss arrived. Roman Voss had arrived at the Glasshouses at 6 p.m. for a reason that had nothing to do with wedding celebrations. Gerald Holt was the father of the bride. Gerald Holt had 3 commercial real estate contracts with shell companies that Roman's legal team had been tracing for 7 months. Roman had accepted a peripheral invitation from a mutual contact in the Holt Group's orbit, a soft social appearance, a face in the room, nothing more. He had planned to stay 40 minutes. He had planned to speak to one person and leave. He had not planned for the woman at the bar. He noticed her before she spoke to him. He noticed most things before they announced themselves. It was a professional habit that had long since become biological. She had arrived in a dark blue dress the color of deep water, with a quality of contained stillness that most people in the room did not have. They were performing. She was enduring. The difference to someone who knew how to look was visible in the grip of her hand around a glass of sparkling water and the single, deliberate breath she took when she spotted someone near the floral arch. He did not look to see who she'd spotted. He already knew it would be someone who had hurt her. Hurt has a specific focal point. You can see it in the direction of a person's gaze. When she turned to him and said, "Please," the second please most of all, the one that cost her something, he felt the decision arrive not as a thought, but as a physical certainty. His cousin Nadia had stood alone in a parking garage 7 years ago. He had been 40 minutes late. Nadia was safe now. But Roman had spent 7 years learning that 40 minutes is a very specific length of time when someone needs another person to simply be present. He was not going to check his phone while this woman walked into a room that was clearly hurting her. He put his phone in his pocket. He offered his arm. He had no idea what he was walking into. He found, to his own surprise, that he did not mind. Cliffhanger. What neither of them understood yet, standing together at that threshold, her hand on his arm, the room spreading out before them like a chessboard someone else had arranged, was that Roman Voss and Bennett Ashford were already connected. And Bennett had 4 days before he found out. The thing about walking into a room with Roman Voss was that you did not know, until you did it, what that meant. Serena felt it in the first 6 steps. It wasn't loud. He didn't announce himself. He didn't nod to people or scan for recognition. He simply walked with that same load-bearing stillness she had registered at the bar. And the room responded the way good rooms respond to a structural element being revealed. A slight realignment. A subtle shift in the direction of people's attention. She heard her own heels on the floor. She was aware of the precise weight of her hand on his arm. She was aware that she had done something irreversible and was not yet sure what category it belonged in. Then she saw Bennett see them. It happened across the room in the space of 2 seconds. Bennett was mid-laugh with a group of men near the bar when something peripheral pulled his eye. He turned. His gaze found Serena first. That registered as a flicker of surprise, the kind that's half pleased and half proprietary, the look of a man who expected to be missed. Then his gaze tracked left to Roman. The laugh stopped. Not all at once. It faded, the way a sound fades when the source is suddenly cut off. His champagne flute paused on its way to his mouth. His jaw did not quite close. Roman did not look at Bennett. Roman looked at the room the way an architect looks at a building, assessing it. Serena, because she was also the kind of person who assessed rooms, looked at the same things he was looking at and understood, in a way she could not yet name, that they were reading the same space in the same language. She leaned 2 degrees closer to him than she had intended. "Thank you," she said under her breath. "Don't thank me yet," he said. His voice was quiet, not unkind. "Why not?" "Because the room just decided you're with me," he said. "That's a complicated thing to be." She looked at him. He was still watching the room. "I'll figure it out," she said. The corner of his mouth moved. Almost. Cliffhanger. What Serena did not know was what being with Roman Voss meant in the specific geometry of New York's power structure. She was about to find out. So was Bennett. Bennett Ashford excused himself from the group near the bar at 6:47 p.m. He found Serena seated at a corner table, a table that should not have existed because he had not arranged corner seating for uninvited guests, which meant someone on the venue staff had moved furniture. This was going to be a conversation later. But first, Serena. He said her name the way you say the name of something that has appeared in the wrong place, a familiar object in an unfamiliar room. She looked up at him with a composure that he recognized because he had spent 3 years interpreting it. He had told himself it was coldness. He understood now, standing here with his champagne flute, that it was not coldness at all. It was the specific look of a person who has decided they owe you nothing and is choosing, in this moment, the specific amount of engagement your presence warrants. The amount was small. "Bennett," she said, "congratulations." "You came," he said. The sentence wanted to be more. Wanted to be "you came and I'm glad," or "you came and why." But he didn't know which ending was right, so it landed in the middle of both. "I was invited," she said. He glanced at the empty seat beside her. The second water glass. The chair that was positioned, subtly, as though someone had recently been in it. Are you here with someone?" "Yes." He waited. She did not add anything. He felt something shift in his chest. Not guilt. He was too practiced at its avoidance for that. Something closer to its predecessor. The awareness that a situation is no longer arranged to his advantage. "Who?" he asked. He said it lightly, as if it were idle conversation. "Roman Voss," she said. The champagne flute stopped moving. Bennett's hand went completely still. 3 tables away, a man in a navy suit turned from a conversation with Gerald Holt himself. Turned just enough to make eye contact with Bennett Ashford for exactly 2 seconds, then looked away. Bennett's hand went cold around the glass. He made himself smile. He said, "Great. That's great. Excuse me." He walked away. He walked directly to the men's room. He stood at the sink and ran cold water and stared at his reflection. Cliffhanger. He knew the name Roman Voss the way every developer in New York knew it. Like a weather system you track on the radar and pray doesn't come your way. Bennett had not prayed hard enough. Roman Voss, Serena would later decide, was the most difficult room she had ever tried to read. They sat at the corner table through the first course, a tomato consommé that was exquisite and too beautiful to eat, and he was something she could not immediately categorize. He asked her questions the way an architect asks questions about a structure, not to fill silence, but to understand load, where the weight was, what was holding. "How long did you live in Red Hook before you opened the studio?" he asked. 2 years. I was subletting a space in Dumbo first. She looked at him. How do you know I'm in Red Hook? I don't know anything about you, he said. You mentioned your studio when you described the dental office renovation. Red Hook was implied. She had mentioned the dental office 15 minutes ago in passing, explaining what she'd been working on. He had been listening to a completely different conversation at the time, or she had thought he was. She made a note of this. Roman Voss listened to everything. Across the room, Bennett was back at his table. He had been watching them in the careful, calculated way of someone who was trying to look like he wasn't watching. She could feel it the way you feel a draft in a room with good insulation, only because you know what to look for. You designed the Halcyon group proposal, Roman said. She put her spoon down. It was not a question. It was the specific phrasing of someone who already has the document in front of them. How do you know about that? She asked. He looked at her for a moment. The deep water gray, the actual attention. Halcyon Group is one of 3 contracts I've been auditing for the last 8 months. The proposal was filed under Bennett Ashford's company name. But the design language is distinctive. It doesn't match anything else he's produced. Serena's chest tightened. You've been auditing Bennett's contracts. Among others. He picked up his water glass. What he did with your work. Did you document it? She thought of the folder on her laptop desktop. The folder she had labeled April. Yes, she said. He nodded. One nod. Good. Cliffhanger. She wanted to ask what he was going to do. She wanted to ask who he was, really, beneath the navy suit and the weight-bearing calm. Instead, she said, Why are you telling me this? And he said, Because you deserve to know. And she understood, without knowing why, that this was not a reassurance. It was a warning about how much was already in motion. She found out about her mother on a Tuesday, 6 days after the wedding. Serena had gone to New York Presbyterian for the regular Thursday visit, but Diane had asked her to come Tuesday this week because there was something she needed to say while she had the energy to say it properly. That specific phrasing, while I have the energy, made Serena's stomach drop in the elevator. What Diane said, sitting in the bed with her tea, looking out the window at the flat, gray October sky, was this. I knew about the Halcyon proposal. I knew before you did. Serena did not move. A woman from Bennett's office called me in March. She wanted to know if I had any of your portfolio materials. I didn't understand what she was asking at first. When I pieced it together later, when his assistant started showing up in the building lobby and you told me the contract had gone quiet, I understood what had happened. Diane kept her eyes on the window. I didn't tell you. Why? Serena said. The word came out flat, like a key pressed without intent. Because I was afraid. Diane finally looked at her. I thought if you confronted him, you'd lose the relationship. And I thought losing the relationship would break you. I thought you needed him. The room was very quiet. Mom, Serena said. I wasn't going to break. Diane's eyes went wet. I know that now. I think I knew it then. I was afraid for myself, too. Her voice dropped. You're all I have, Siri. I was afraid of what the stress would do to you. To us. Serena sat with it. The way she sat with a room that had problems she needed to understand before she could fix them. She was hurt. She was also, somewhere underneath the hurt, clear-eyed. Her mother had made a wrong choice out of love and fear. Those two things could be true at the same time. She took her mother's hand. I'm not breaking, she said. I need you to believe that. Diane nodded. She gripped Serena's fingers. Cliffhanger. What Serena did not tell her mother that day, because she was still processing it herself, was that she had a folder on her laptop called April, and she had spent the previous evening being asked by a man she barely knew if she had documented everything. She was beginning to understand that the documentation might matter more than she'd thought. Marcus told her on a Wednesday morning over the phone, voice low and careful, the way he spoke when he was trying to deliver information without alarming her. Roman Voss, how much do you know? He runs a private equity fund, Serena said. Voss Capital, Park Avenue. That's the public version. She set down her coffee. Marcus had spent 2 days doing the kind of research that involves 3 browser tabs and a friend who used to work in financial journalism. What he had assembled was not a scandal. It was more complicated than that. Roman Voss was not a criminal. He had never been charged with anything. But he operated at the precise edge of legality in a way that required the kind of lawyers who did not appear on firm websites. He controlled 4 logistics networks on the eastern seaboard. He had interests in 3 port contracts in New Jersey and Maryland that were managed through holding companies. He was not violent. By every account, he was a man who solved problems with paperwork and patience. But the paperwork, in the wrong hands, could close businesses and freeze accounts and end careers with the cold precision of a surgical instrument. He had an arrangement with 2 federal agencies, not a partnership, an arrangement, the kind where information flows in one direction in exchange for a latitude that does not appear in any official record. He's not a mobster, Marcus said. He's something more specific than that. What's he investigating Bennett for? Serena asked. Port contract fraud. Bennett's development company is one of 4 linked to fraudulent material sourcing on a Jersey City infrastructure project. There are federal dollars involved. Marcus paused. Siri. He's been building this case for 8 months. You walked into that wedding and sat down next to the one person in New York who was already dismantling your ex. Serena looked at the rosemary plant on her windowsill. Did he know who I was when I asked him? I don't think so, Marcus said. But he knows now, and he's still calling you. She looked at the 3 missed calls on her phone from an unsaved number, all from the last 48 hours. What do I do? She asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment. I think, he said, you answer. Cliffhanger, she called back. He answered on the second ring, and the first thing he said was not hello. It was, I need to ask you something and I need you to answer honestly. She said, okay. He said, the folder you labeled April, is it complete? The photo appeared on a Thursday. It was on a financial news site, not front page, not above the fold, but visible enough. A photograph taken at the Glasshouses reception, Roman Voss in his navy suit, and beside him, a woman in a dark blue dress, her hand on his arm, both of them mid-stride and not looking at the camera. The caption read, Roman Voss at the Ashford Holt wedding, and who is the woman at his side? By Friday morning, the photo had been picked up by 2 additional outlets and a celebrity gossip aggregate that covered wealthy New York social circles. The word used, in various headlines, was mystery. The Ritz-Carlton of words when you want to imply something without saying it. By Saturday noon, Serena had received 3 emails. The florist in Carroll Gardens wrote that she needed to put their project on pause. She didn't elaborate. The dental office in Flushing sent a politely worded message saying they had decided to go with another designer at this time. A third client, a restaurant owner in the West Village who had been about to sign a contract for a renovation, simply did not respond to her follow-up. 3 clients, in 48 hours. Because of a photograph she had not consented to and could not unpublish. She sat at her drafting table in Red Hook and did the arithmetic. The 3 lost contracts represented roughly $31,000 in potential revenue. Her mother's next treatment cycle in 12 days. The $4,000 in her Chase account. She did not call Roman. She did not call Marcus. She opened her laptop and she began redesigning her portfolio website. Because that was what she could control, that was the work. She worked for 4 hours. She built a contact page and updated her project descriptions and added 3 new photographs of completed spaces. She made the site look like a declaration. I am here. I am professional. I am not a caption in someone else's story. At 9 p.m., her phone rang. Unsaved number. She let it ring once, twice. Then she thought about the folder labeled April. She thought about the rosemary on the windowsill. She thought about her mother saying, "That's what you do, Sari. You restore things." She answered. Cliffhanger. Roman's voice on the phone was careful and quiet and said, "I know about the article. I know about the clients. I need you to come to Park Avenue tomorrow morning. I have something to show you, and you should see it before it becomes public." She said, "What is it?" He said, "It's everything." The offices of Voss Capital occupied the 31st and 32nd floors of a tower on Park Avenue, with windows that framed the midtown skyline like a painting someone had commissioned to remind you of scale. Serena arrived at 10 a.m. in a gray wool coat and her best boots and the specific composure of a person who had slept 4 hours and was not going to show it. Roman met her himself. He took her to a conference room on the 32nd floor with a mahogany table and no visible technology and a view that was, by any measure, extraordinary. He did not offer small talk. He set a folder on the table. Inside the folder, 68 pages, her 68 pages, the Halcyon Group proposal, annotated in 3 colors of ink by what appeared to be a legal and design verification team. Notations that cataloged page by page the evidence of her authorship. "My team has had this since April," Roman said. "We subpoenaed Bennett's communications as part of the port contract fraud investigation. His email records contained an internal thread in which he forwarded your proposal to Gerald Holt's team 18 hours after you sent it to him for feedback." He sat across from her. He told them he'd developed it over 6 months with his team. He billed Halcyon Group for design services at a rate of $300 per hour. 12 weeks. Serena looked at the numbers, the billing, the hours, the credit. "He made $144,000 from my work," she said. The number was specific. It landed like weight. $144,400, Roman said. "There's also the Cassandra Holt connection. The Halcyon contract was the condition Gerald Holt set for taking Bennett on as a son-in-law. Your proposal didn't just win him money, it won him the marriage." "I want to know something," Serena said. She looked at him directly. "At the wedding. You didn't know who I was when I asked you to walk in with me. But by the time we sat down for dinner, you had connected me to the proposal. And you still told me. Why didn't you wait? Use it as leverage?" Roman looked at her for a long moment. "Because it was yours," he said. "It was always yours." Cliffhanger. She looked at the 68 pages. She looked at the man across the table and she said, "What happens to Bennett now?" And Roman said, "What do you want to happen?" What Serena wanted was not revenge. This surprised her. She sat with the question for a long moment in that conference room on the 32nd floor. The city arranged below the windows like a map of everything she had been trying to navigate for months. She thought about what revenge would look like. The specific satisfaction of watching Bennett's face when the thing he had built on her foundation was pulled out from under him. She thought about it, and then she set it aside. "I want documentation of authorship on record," she said. "I want his name removed from the Halcyon project credit anywhere it still appears, and I want the billing he collected for my work treated as what it legally is: misappropriation." Roman nodded. He was writing something on a notepad in the economical handwriting of a person who takes notes for himself, not for an audience. "A civil claim for the design fees plus damages," she said. "I'm not interested in destroying him beyond what the work justifies. I'm interested in what's accurate." "That's your right," Roman said. "What's yours?" she asked. "In this. What do you get from it?" "The port fraud case is separate. That moves regardless of your civil claim. Bennett and 2 other developers have been building infrastructure projects with substandard materials and billing federal contracts for premium. That case will proceed." "So he loses everything," she said. "He loses what he built on other people's work," Roman said, "which in Bennett Ashford's case is most of it." She nodded. She picked up her bag. She stood. Then she said, without looking at him, "I'm sorry I pulled you into something that cost you." "You didn't cost me anything," he said. "The article. The complication." "I've been a complication in that room for 8 months," Roman said. "You were the only thing that evening that wasn't complicated." She looked at him then. The gray eyes. The attention, which had not wavered once in all the interactions she had catalogued. The man who had given her the folder because it was hers, not as a trade, not as leverage, because it was hers. She said, "I'll be in touch about the next steps." She left. In the elevator, she let herself shake for exactly 4 floors. Then she straightened her coat and walked out onto Park Avenue and took the subway back to Red Hook. Cliffhanger. She had 6 missed texts from Marcus when she surfaced at Smith and 9th. The last one said, "Turn on the news. Bennett Ashford's company just had its accounts frozen." She stood on the platform in the cold October air and felt something leave her body. Not forgiveness, not triumph. Something heavier than both. The civil settlement was reached in January. $180,000. The original billing, plus damages, plus legal fees. The judge took 11 minutes to sign the order. Serena was not in the courtroom. She was at New York Presbyterian, sitting with her mother, when her attorney called. She used the settlement to clear her mother's medical debt in full. Every line item, every outstanding balance, every future cycle of treatment through the end of the current protocol. She wrote the check herself. She handed it to the billing department in person. Then she went back to Red Hook and she worked. She redesigned her portfolio. She pitched 3 new clients: a community arts center in Crown Heights, a physical therapy practice in Park Slope, and a boutique hotel developer in Soho, who had found her work through a referral from, of all people, Gerald Holt's former assistant, who had been quietly appalled by what Bennett had done and had gone out of her way to make it right. Calloway Studio opened its Soho office 14 months after the wedding at the Glasshouses. The space was on Spring Street, with original tin ceilings and wide plank oak floors, and 2 drafting tables and Marcus's photography on the walls. The opening was small. Clients, a few colleagues, her mother in a yellow dress who cried twice and pretended she hadn't. Roman came. He stood near the doorway and watched the room. He had come to every single meeting her attorney had required, and he had not sent flowers or made gestures. He had been present, consistently and without theatrics, in the way of a person who had decided that being present was the thing he could offer. He stayed until the last guest left. Then it was just the two of them, and the tin ceiling and the light from Spring Street coming through the front window. He reached into his jacket pocket. He placed a small box on the drafting table. Platinum. Simple. One round stone. "Marry me, Serena," he said. 4 words, not a question. A statement of intent from a man who did not make announcements he hadn't already thought through from every angle. She looked at the ring. She looked at him. "You know this is going to be complicated," she said. "I'm familiar with complicated," he said. She picked up the ring. She put it on herself. "Yes," she said. Cliffhanger. Marcus found out the next morning when Serena sent him a photo. He called back in 30 seconds, which was also a record. This time, he was crying. She pretended not to notice. He pretended the same. Bennett Ashford's development company filed for bankruptcy protection in March. The port fraud case, the one Roman had been building for 8 months before Serena walked into the Glasshouses, went before a federal grand jury in April. Bennett cooperated. He gave names, dates, and documentation in exchange for a reduced sentence recommendation. He lost the business, the reputation, the Park Avenue address, and the apartment in Tribeca he had purchased in Cassandra Holt's name. Cassandra had filed for annulment 4 days after the accounts were frozen. She had not been complicit. She had simply, as she told a friend, made a miscalculation about character. Gerald Holt was not charged. He cut ties with Bennett in a press release that took 3 paragraphs and said nothing. Business as usual at the scale where business is always usual. Serena heard about all of it the way you hear about weather in a city you used to live in. Informative, occasionally clarifying, no longer personal. She was busy. The Crown Heights Arts Center won a design award in May. Her mother's oncologist used the word remission for the first time in June. Calloway Studio signed its 5th contract in July. Marcus was booked to photograph the wedding in September. Small, on the roof of a building in the West Village. Diane in yellow again. Roman in the navy suit he had been wearing the night none of them planned any of this. Here is the thing about rooms. Every room has a load-bearing element, a wall, a beam, a column, that everything else depends on. Most people never find it. They decorate around it. They move furniture. They change the lighting and repaint, and wonder why the space still doesn't feel right. Serena had spent 10 years learning to find the thing that holds a space up. She had not applied the skill to herself until the night she stood at a bar in the Glasshouses with a glass of Pellegrino in her hand and a room tilting under her feet and said please twice to a stranger who was already paying attention. She did not fall in love because she was rescued. She fell in love because she was seen, and seeing requires someone to be paying attention. If you had been Serena that night, standing at that bar, knowing what she knew, would you have asked? Comment seen if this story stayed with you. Subscribe if you believe love is something you build, not something that happens to you. And if you want part 2, the wedding, comment September. Love always wins here. See you next time.